Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Hey, it's my pleasure to welcome another one of our clients for a client case study, and that is Bruce Weyer. It's good to have him here. He's coming to us from northern area of Florida. He's in Jacksonville Beach right now at his office. You probably heard me talking about it a couple of months ago. He was the one who was kind enough to send me the insider newsletter that I'm holding up right now. If you happen to be looking at a video version, the Lumber Market Report. This is the Random Lengths newsletter, and this is kind of the inside of the lumber market. What does that mean for us as investors? Well, of course, you know, it's all about packaged commodities investing, as I call it. And lumber is a huge component of housing prices and housing construction. So we'll talk about that a little bit, as well as his case study and his background. Bruce, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
It's definitely good to have you. You know, I almost was wondering, just want to tell the audience, if they're watching on video, we did not coordinate our shirt colors.
No, we certainly did not. I did think about that.
We're both wearing red shirts by coincidence. Bruce, first of all, you're in the lumber business now because that's a family business. And I know you said I think your father wants to retire, and he said you lived in Southern California, Dana Point to be specific. And so that's you know, I'm from that general area. And you were kind of in the movie business and the infomercial business and all of that stuff. And then you moved to Florida to get back into the family business. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I was out in Dana Point, California, as you just mentioned. And once I was out there, I was just kind of hanging out, surfing and having a good time. And I started going to college and graduated from Cal State Fullerton and decided to go into the media industry. And I got really lucky right off the bat. Actually, our mutual friend, Aaron Copelson, again, he introduced me to— He's
also been on the podcast. Yep.
Yeah, he's also been on the podcast. He's a good buddy of mine from Orange County. He introduced me to a guy in the Teamsters Union, and that guy was nice enough to introduce me to some people in production. And I got really lucky to work on some network television shows like Scandal, Mistresses with Alyssa Milano, and some feature films like Fast and the Furious and McFarland and Horrible Bosses 2, and just a bunch of different stuff. But I got really lucky getting into that right out of the gate. So worked there for about 4.5 to 5 years in LA, working in Hollywood, all the major studios. But once my wife and I decided to start having some kids and kind of settle down, that was a big rat race that I was trying to get out of. And that's what led me back into Orange County and kind of the infomercial, commercial production area. There's just a lot more of that going on in Orange County, whereas the feature films and network TV shows is all happening right there in the Burbank, Hollywood area.
Yeah, Los Angeles. So you did live in Los Angeles, probably then moved south to Orange County, Southern California. We're talking Southern California here. Probably lived in LA before though, right?
No, I didn't. I was commuting the whole time I was doing production. So our call times were either really early in the morning or weird times in the day. So I wasn't necessarily like fighting that grinding traffic all the time, even though it was a problem. But I will say that was the only good part about commuting up there, is I would go up there at really some off times to work on shows, whether they were night shoots in downtown or whether they were just studio shoots on the stage or whatever we were doing.
What did you do in the movie industry?
I started off as a production assistant, which was just like the very entry level guy. And then I started working myself up to assistant director and production coordinator. And I kind of exited as a associate producer/producer.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Okay, so then you got into the infomercial side of the business. And, you know, anybody in real estate has certainly seen enough infomercials. In fact, when I was 16 years old, I've told this story before, but I saw an infomercial and it got me intrigued about real estate investing. So that's kind of funny now. At the company you worked at, I don't know if they did real estate infomercials. They did a lot of product infomercials, I know. But tell us about that business a little bit. And, interestingly, I was at a conference last week and one of the speakers there was Ron LeGrand, infomercial guru, as you know. And that is a big risk, big money business potentially.
Big time.
Certainly a lot of shysters and scam artists, no question, like in anything. Give us a little insight into the infomercial business, if you would.
Yeah, it was, I worked with a lot of good people. They were very professional. I worked for a company called Script to Screen, and we handled some pretty big accounts. We were doing Gibson headphones. They came out with their first Bluetooth headphones, and those were, or I should say wireless headphones. And that was a really big deal. And everybody knows Gibson because of the guitars. And we worked with Shark Ninja, and they make all of those great vacuums and Instapot cooking things. So there's a lot of houseware items, and some of it was definitely pretty hokey stuff that we were doing because they were infomercials. But at the end, we were starting to do little 15-second YouTube pre-roll-in advertisement clips. So we would do everything from a little 15-second ad to a full 28 minutes and 30-second full-on half-hour infomercial. And it was kind of nice because we would have, 9 months of writing the script and designing the sets and lining up our actors and doing all that. And then we would go shoot it for a week. So that I like that a lot better because it got me off of just being on set all the time. When I was working in LA and in Hollywood, it was just 12 to 15 hours a day, walking around, actually shooting, doing production. Whereas on the infomercial side, I was involved in the pre-production, the actual production, and then post-production for a while. And then we would even buy the media time to air the infomercial on wherever we were airing it and for however long we were going to air it for. And develop the websites as well, because there's a whole back end of websites and distribution that has to happen with all that. So it was very interesting to see kind of behind the curtain on that whole deal.
Sure. Yeah, it is. So you didn't do any of the guru type infomercials like Carlton Sheets or anything like that, did you?
No, really, we worked a lot with Shark Ninja. We did I don't know if you remember the Ninja Coffee Bar with Sofia Vergara. That was a really big talent that they landed a few years back. We did all the creative and shot the production for that. So that was pretty cool.
Interesting. Good stuff. Well, hey, let's move on to the lumber business because this obviously affects real estate investors. And I want to talk about your investing experience as well. How long ago did you find my podcast?
Probably, I was just about to move back to Florida. So this would have been 2016, summer of 2016, maybe fall of 2016.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. You probably heard me talk about, packaged commodities investing and stuff like that. And when you sent over this fantastic report, just with some inside info on the lumber industry, I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening right now. Give us an update on the market and what's going on.
It's unbelievable what's been happening. It was everything. It was so really cool to see the supply demand shock that you were already talking about from March, but it hadn't hit my industry yet. So we were just kind of chugging along, and we're going through this pandemic, and everything was going really well. And obviously Florida, the demand is huge. Everything that we do is Southern yellow pine in the Florida market. And that's all of the specific pine that goes into the framing of the houses.
Southern yellow pine, it's called.
If you're driving around Florida or Georgia and you see pine trees in the lumber industry, that is called Southern yellow pine. And that's what goes into the trusses, the floor joists, the panels, the studs and everything. They do use some spruce pine fir, but just for logistical reasons and freight, they use the Southern yellow pine because that's what's here. And basically, some of the mills, they started having some employees coming down with COVID, and they had new policies, and they just couldn't be running like they were normally running. The efficiency wasn't there. So the supply that they were producing was lowered, and the demand was through the roof, with interest rates being very low and everybody leaving the major metro areas, coming to Florida. The prices just started to creep at first, and then they just started to really skyrocket to the point where, one of the largest lumber providers is called West Fraser, and they took about 5 mills completely off the market. I mean, they wouldn't even sell to us. We've been buying lumber from them and paying them within 10 days, taking a discount on every truck that we buy from them for 42 years. And they just went completely off the market.
Now, they went off the market because they didn't have supply, or they're a mill, so they're producing supply.
They are producing supply. They're receiving the logs, and then they're milling those into 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, and everything. And the reason for that,
you wouldn't think that would be like an affected business, though. I mean, they could continue to operate during the pandemic, right?
I think they had people going down, and the other thing is they had oversold their contracts. So instead of renegotiating some of their contracts, on people that are buying contract lumber and saying, "Hey, we're in a pandemic, we need to serve the open market as well as service the contract." They told anybody that wasn't a contract that, "Hey, we just can't sell you right now." And then that really, the thing about that is that put the pressure on all the other smaller mills that we also deal with that don't have any contracts on with anybody. So then those guys just got completely bombarded, and it really rocked the lumber market.
So I predicted, and I think we've seen this just a little bit, at least I started watching the lumber futures market more closely after reading your newsletter, but that has abated a little bit, right? It's a little better now, right? Because it's getting a little more equal. I mean, it's not equal, but it's better than it was, right?
It's better than it was. They're now starting to quote and starting to ship a little bit more, but still the prices are, so take a 2x4 number 2 common 16-foot truck, right? People buy those all the time. Normally back pre-pandemic, those were probably somewhere in the mid 400s, mid 500 per 1,000 board feet. They're still up over $1,000 per 1,000 board feet right now. So it's still double what it was. Yes.
Double?
Double.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. So even now, as things are starting to get a little more semi-normal, or they're moving in the normal direction, it's still double the price.
Still twice as much.
Wow. No wonder the cost of construction has gone up, and the builders have been raising their prices like crazy. Now, I talked a lot many years ago during the Great Recession, back in 2008, so 12 years ago now, about what I call regression to replacement cost, where, what I used to say is when a piece of wood costs what a piece of wood is worth again, meaning that houses were selling below the cost of construction for a short time, and that had to fix itself. And regression to replacement cost is not the same thing as appreciation, because appreciation mostly takes place in the land value, not in the construction ingredients or the packaged commodities. Now we look at the price of this, and it's just absolutely crazy. I would assume that's true with many other building materials as well, although I haven't had time to do much research on it. But obviously lumber's a giant component. So what do you see happening in the future, Bruce? I
think prices are going to continue to hold at this level, especially in the 2x4 market. So the 2x6s have started to decline. They're nowhere near where their price equilibrium was months ago, but they have started to decline some. But the 2x4 market is still holding very steady. I mean, you call to get a quote on a truck, a random length truck, that's like 8 foot through 16 foot. And a lot of mills still won't even quote it.
Wow.
They don't even have
because
it.
they just don't have anything to sell. So why give you a quote, right?
They don't have it.
Wow. And why would there be a difference in 2x6s and 2x4s? Any particular reason for that?
They're using 2x4s a lot more than the 2x6.
Yeah. Okay. But I would assume this market's already set up so it supplies more 2x4s too, right? Because that's kind of the basic ingredient.
They do, but certain mills cut for certain dimensions more. Some mills kind of cut towards the wider lengths more, and that's kind of their wheelhouse. And some mills are cutting for strictly 2x4s, and that's our job, is to weave all that together.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. So is there any relief in sight for this, or will it just continue to increase? And by the way, let me just hold up this chart. I'm just literally holding it in front of the camera. Pardon the low tech here, folks. But, you get it. There is the chart from the newsletter. That's absolutely mind-boggling. And, here, I actually read this on the podcast before, is the market overview, the narrative portion. But will anything give us relief from this, or are we just looking at higher lumber prices for a long time?
Well, it's hard to tell. So I was also the guy that sent you the email about David Weekley with the homes going completely off the market.
Right.
If they just completely stop selling the homes, so everybody's buying, 30 and 90 days out. Well, if we get 90 days from now and you have people and builders like David Weekley or Lennar saying, hey, we're not going to take a new order because they just can't price in the increases fast enough to pass it along to their customer, well, then the housing starts and the permits issued will all fall. And then the demand will fall just because they're not entering in new orders. So that could offset it, but I doubt that's going to happen because, we're in Florida and interest rates are low and people are getting the hell out of all those towns and coming down here.
Right. But you don't just supply to Florida, do you?
Yes, we're strictly Florida. Yep.
For your stuff. So a home builder orders the lumber through you. Are you considered a broker?
We're wholesalers and we actually don't sell to builders. We sell to truss companies. We sell to distributors. So we're selling to people that are treating lumber like Great Southern Wood or Boise or Robbins Manufacturing. And then those guys are then selling to the builders. So we're literally buying from the mills that are creating the product. And, because the home builders, they want it in such a specific way that we're not doing that. We're literally buying truckload quantities and we're shipping those to a distribution company or a truss company where then the builder is putting in an order with the truss company for a specific neighborhood or specific home model that they've created.
Okay. Makes sense. With your investing, since we've been talking about Florida because that's the lumber subject, but with your investing, you just purchased 2 properties through a network in Florida and you also purchased 2 out of state, right? Tell us about your portfolio.
Yep. So I originally started in Dayton, Ohio. And the only reason I've been listening to you for a while and I called up Sarah and I said, hey, I know there's nothing on your website in Dayton, but this is where my wife is from, the Cincinnati, Dayton area in between there. And I'm a big fan of Tom Wheelwright as well. And he says, hey, buy somewhere where you can go and use it as a write-off and all this other stuff. And I can kind of keep it's arm's length away from me. So I went and bought a duplex in Dayton, Ohio. And that was the first thing that I purchased there. And then ended up buying a fourplex in Dayton. And then now I have 2 duplexes under contract in Palm Coast.
Good stuff. And before we started today, you had talked about a bit of a strategy there. So why don't you share that with the listeners?
Okay. So part of my strategy is, Jason, what you've taught me a lot is that part of what I'm purchasing or one of the main things I'm trying to obtain is the largest loan size I can at the lowest interest rate for the longest amount of time I possibly can. So, I started off with the duplex because it was really a low number and I was just trying to get my feet wet. And then I moved up to the fourplex. And then now I'm going with the new construction duplexes because I'm trying to get as many doors as I can under the 10 Fannie and Freddie loans that I have with the highest loan amounts. So if I try to go out and buy that single family home for $100,000, while I think that's a good deal, really, I want those 10 Fannie and Freddie loans to be locked in at the biggest numbers I can handle.
Absolutely. So you're trying to do more of the more expensive properties earlier in the game
That's right.
Because you want those really good loans. And we call this mortgage sequencing, by the way. We talked about this strategy years ago, but not lately on the show. And you want to get as many of those in the highest possible loan amounts for that first 10. Now, if your wife is working, she can qualify as well. So, I don't know if she is, but it's 10 loans each spouse. So you're not just limited to 10, you can do 20, but both parties do have to qualify. So if one isn't working, then it's not going to work. But good. So why Palm Coast?
Again, that's kind of close to my house. So Palm Coast is only 40 minutes away from me. I feel like one of the hardest things for me in choosing all of these is I'm looking at your website, I'm getting kind of Sarah's hot sheet, and I'm looking at everything and judging my opportunity cost, I feel like is really difficult because I'm like, hey, I could do this deal here in Alabama. I could do this here over here, and I'm not really sure what to do. So really, I called them up and I said, hey, what market do you guys really like and you think has a good chance for appreciation? And then after they found out where I lived, they said, hey, man, it just makes sense for you to invest right down the street from you, But
don't be limited by that, okay? You've got your wife's hometown for some of your investments, and then not too far from you. You don't want to be excluded from a good deal because the deal is more important than the location. that's just something you want to keep in mind. Are you going to do a third or fourth or fifth market? We say invest in at least 3, but not more than 5. Are you going to put another one on there?
Yes, definitely. Cash is becoming a little bit of an issue at this point because I just did the 2 and those are right at about $300,000 a piece. So I got to come up with the down payment for both of those. Yeah, I definitely plan on it. I'm going to try to close on both of these Palm Coast in this coming spring. And then, that was another thing that I was going to mention is the CARES Act. We talked a little bit about that beforehand. So now that I've listened to you for a few years, I'm all chips in, I'm not doing the whole, hey, let me just give money out of my income that I'm creating now into an IRA or 401k and put on a blindfold and hope I wake up in 35 years and it's all good.
Right.
I'm just not doing that. So we've decided.
I like that philosophy. Good.
Yes, I know. So it's not really that scary, but I feel like when I talk to my peers about it, they're going, what are you doing? You're listening to some guy on a podcast and now you're liquidating your IRA. And I'm saying, yeah, that's actually exactly what I'm doing. His name's Jason Hartman. Here's the link to one of these things. And I'm in. Yeah,
good deal. So to be specific, what you're talking about there is, are you borrowing money from your IRA without penalty, or what exactly is your CARES Act strategy there? Or you're liquidating because, Tom Wheelwright and Garrett Sutton, both of those authors are really just not fans of these plans at all.
No, they are not.
I don't hate them as much as they do, but I don't think they're great either. Okay, so I'm like a little more in the middle than both of them are. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I basically agree with Tom Wheelwright, and I feel like we've been fortunate enough. My wife is a registered nurse, and she has been for the last 15 plus years. And she's getting match money. She's working for these great companies, and it's been building, and all that's been great. But now that the CARES Act came along, they said, hey, listen, you can take out up to $100,000 with no 10% penalty. And you can also pay the tax on the income from whatever amount you take out over the course of 3 years instead of getting hit in the first year, which that's actually how I paid for that quadplex, and I said, hey, if we're going to be in a bad situation with this pandemic and everything going on, at least that's a silver lining that's coming out of it. And I'm just going for it.
That's great. That's a great deal. You're going to do much better in the properties. I am sure of that, if I'm sure of anything.
And one other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, or at least mention to you, is, you always say that these deals always look better in the rear view mirror, right? So I'm trying to take a macro view on this. And even if I do take a little bit of a hit on getting my money out of these IRAs on the sums that I'm taking out, Jason, once I've had that principal paid down and the appreciation goes up and I have the cash flow coming in, 7, 8, 10, 12 years from now, when I look back, I'm going to say, man, I wish I bought more of those things, right? So I completely agree with you on that philosophy that I've heard you state on the podcast.
Good. I'm glad you like it. Any other questions or thoughts or things you want to share about your own investing plans or experiences?
Yes. So you had mentioned sometimes acquiring these properties for as little down as possible. So I've actually been borrowing on the duplex and on the quadplex I owned. I borrowed private money and I put down about 10 to 15%. And I held those for a few years. And then when the interest rates dropped as low as they did, I then refinanced them. So I was borrowing the money on the quadplex, it was at 7, and on the duplex, it was at 6.5. And I just refinanced both of those down to 4%.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, and I'm going to do the same thing on the 2 duplexes at the Palm Coast. I have a deal where I can get into both of those at 15% down.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought is just, hey, make the tenant do the work. If I can acquire an asset for 15% down, yes, I get a little bit less cash flow each month. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that's great. The only thing you need to consider is the cost of any mortgage insurance that might be required and the cost of any difference in interest rate. And that, or difference in points, and points are just prepaid interest. So it's the same idea, but that might influence you to some extent. Of course, always we like as much leverage as possible, as little down as possible. But, if you're paying a giant premium for that privilege, then you may want to think twice about it and put a little more down. It's only 5%. So, occasionally I've seen to where, even I will say, put that extra 5% down. You just have to analyze the loan and the opportunity cost of that money. That's really it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the plan that I'm going with is, put as little down as I can while I have the opportunity to do so. And if I need to, like, as you say, renegotiate the deal as I go along.
Yeah.
That's
Isn't
basically
that beautiful?
It's amazing. And the other thing I was talking to you about was my primary home. I bought in St. Johns County in 2019, in July of 2019 for $460,000. And then at 3.75, so I put 20% down of 460 at 3.75, locked in for 30 years. I just I did a cash out refi on that 3 weeks ago, where they newly appraised my property at $530,000, and I got a 2.875 rate for 30 years.
Awesome. That is phenomenal. Here, we need sound effects for that. That's how good it is. Yeah. Isn't that incredible? So you got a 30-year asset there on all of those properties. Acquire as many of those assets as you can. That's the thing to do.
And I got to thank you for that, because honestly, I feel like I'm just like doing black ops stuff behind the scenes. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm talking to Sarah on the West Coast, and I'm like pulling these strings and doing all this stuff. And the people that in my peer group or my neighbors and other people I'm talking about, they're just really not doing what I'm doing.
Well, you know what? You don't want everybody doing what you're doing, because they'll snake all the great properties. So there's enough real estate investors out there who get it. Don't worry about that.
I'm sure there are.
But yeah, try to convince them and help them. But some people just get it, some won't. And usually they won't in a conversation or a soundbite. They've got to be interested themselves, and they've got to not trust the current system we're all hypnotized with, which is the 401k IRA BS, the Wall Street BS. You got to make your own way in the world. That's the only way to do it. And income property is the best way to do that, as we both know, and probably everybody listening knows. So Bruce, this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Anything else you want to share? It could be about anything, the lumber market, the construction market, your own story, any questions as we wrap it up.
No, not really. I think I'm just going all chips in on the lumber industry. I got to thank my friend Aaron Copelson. I'll tell you a quick story. We were standing on the beach with our surfboards. We were about to go surfing at Doheny Beach. And Aaron goes, "Hey, I'm going to fly out to Little Rock, Arkansas next week and look at buying an investment property." And I had never really heard the idea of the philosophy at all. And I was like, "What?" And we're literally putting wax on the surfboard, feet in the sand, heading out to go surfing. And I just thought about he goes, "Yeah, man, I'm just going to buy a house and have a tenant pay off my debt." And I remember when he said that, I was like, "That's a really good idea."
It is a good idea.
I need to check that out.
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of all downhill from there. And here we are.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. That's great to hear. And folks, just to elaborate on Bruce's point there, remember, I've said it before, but think about how significant this is. A typical renter will spend 40% of their monthly income on rent. So literally about 10 to 14 days per month, they're literally working for you to pay off your mortgage. Isn't that like what other business, Bruce, is there where some customer spends that high a percentage of their income with this business? There is no other business. It's not Amazon. Zero. It's not Apple Computer. It's not going to Vegas and spending money in casinos, I hope. Not at least, nowhere else do they spend as much money as they do is with their landlord. Their landlord is their highest, it's the big store. It's where they spend most of their money. So that's fantastic. Yeah.
And I've been that guy. I was doing that out in Dana Point, California. We could either rent where we wanted to live, which was a block off PCH in Dana Point, and be able to go surfing and have a good time, or own where we didn't want to live, which was out there in Riverside, Yorba Linda, and You know where I'm talking about.
Yeah, I definitely know where you're talking about. And you know what, though? Renting that place in Dana Point probably wasn't a bad deal because the rent-to-value ratio was in your favor. So
That's
as long as you own other rental properties to compensate for that rent you pay. So that's the point. Bruce, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the story. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your business, too. And happy investing. Thanks again.
You got it, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.